drugs, or ideas, what you consume influences who you become. On the Mind and Matter podcast, we learn together from the best scientists and thinkers alive today about how your mind-body reacts to what you feed it. Before starting Mind and Matter, I spent 10 years in academia doing scientific research. I got a PhD in neuroscience where I focused on neuroendocrinology and the neurobiology of behavior, and before that, I specialized in molecular, developmental, and evolutionary genetics. I use my scientific background to help parse and translate the information that guests share on the podcast. In addition to the podcast, I write long-form written content inspired by the show where I integrate what I've learned across episodes. I also have a free weekly newsletter where I provide you with upcoming guests, share links, and provide commentary on scientific studies and research that I'm reading, and more. Visit mindandmatter.substack.com to find all of my content. You are about to listen to the full episode, but there will be 1 to 2 short ads immediately following this before the conversation. If you would like to hear ad-free episodes and get early access before they release more widely, become a paid subscriber at the Mind and Matter Substack at mindandmatter.substack.com. Becoming a paid subscriber is a way to directly support my efforts, allowing me to make more episodes and higher quality episodes, and also helping to free up my time so that I can spend more of it on doing research and synthesizing results from the podcast and from the literature so that I can do more things like writing on the Substack, putting more content into the newsletter, and getting these things out more frequently. So if you want to support the show and get ad-free episodes, go to mindandmatter.substack.com. Hey everyone, a great way to support my efforts is to visit my support page at mindandmatter.substack.com. A link to that page is in the episode description, or you can search for it on the Substack page itself. The support page has an up-to-date list of my affiliate partners. These are companies I work with, and if you buy those products through those links or using the discount codes provided, those will get you a great deal on a variety of products related to optimizing physical, metabolic, or mental health and vitality. These are all products I use myself, and some of them are directly related to podcast episodes or formulated by Mind and Matter guests. For example, there's a great product called Keto Citra, formulated by a kidney biologist who is on episode number 186. It contains the ketone body BHB together with several minerals in a precise ratio formulated with kidney health in mind. There are also links to products like physical technology devices to track your metabolic health, digital applications to help you find and learn about food and consumer products, and more. One product I use every day is the AquaTrue water filter. I recommend this to everyone because it gets everything out of your drinking water: heavy metals, microbes, endocrine disruptors, microplastics, you name it. Other charcoal or gravity-based filters that a lot of people use don't get everything out, they just get some of the stuff out. So I really like the AquaTrue product. You can look for a link to my affiliate partners on my support page or directly in the episode description to this episode, or you can go to mindandmatter.substack.com to find it there.
Thank you so much for having me. I always love nerding out about PUFAs in the context of food system inside of our bodies, so I'm excited.
What do you do for a living?
Yeah, this is confusing. So I was in mechanical engineering in undergrad, was convinced by my peers that the best thing to do would be to go into academia. So I went to grad school. Let's just spend, 6 years in grad school. Got a PhD in mechanical engineering. During that timeline, I started to get sick in terms of unexpected symptoms coming up at a young age, right? You're in your early 20s. You shouldn't be dealing with like extreme digestive issues, chronic fatigue, Raynaud's, cold hands and feet, and things like that. So I'm sure that's how many of us got interested in all these like really niche topics, right? We experienced some sort of health challenge and then we were like, I'm sick of the pharmaceutical model. I just want to figure it out. And that's what you go do. You unfortunately have to have some sort of health challenge, which then makes you go down these paths, right? And that's the unfortunate thing is many of us get to these places after experiencing some health challenges. So in grad school, I was deep diving into health rabbit holes, found the work of Dr. Ray Peat, and learned about, he's one of the original people who have discussed seed oils for like a very long time. So he was starting to talk about those in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, and up until the point that he passed. So I learned about polyunsaturated fats, seed oils, and all of those things, and how much of what we were told like saturated fat is the villain and swap your butter for margarine, all those things that I believe full-heartedly that they were all a lie. So found the work of Dr. Ray P. in grad school. I was at that place of like, I don't like my work anymore. I just want to go down these rabbit holes, and essentially came to the conclusion that like the food system had changed so much in the last 100 years. And that's what I was most interested in. And so I became obsessed with let's change it back to how it used to be. And the rest is history. So after I finished my PhD, I told my advisors, hello, I am not going to become a professor. I am going to become a farmer. The look on their faces was interesting, but that's how I got to wanting to become a farmer and realizing that how we farm impacts our food, which impacts our health. So I became a first generation farmer. We dove in with egg layers, realized that all the feed options out there were just filled with corn byproducts, soybean oil, canola oil, all that stuff. So we made our own, worked with Michigan State University to get some research papers done, get some fatty acid analysis testing done of our eggs, and realized that we created a pretty cool egg that had significantly less linoleic acid. And I was like, wow, this is pretty awesome. Then we started having customers. They started being able to eat eggs again for the first time. Things stumbled. People were like, you should do more than eggs. So we started adding all these other things to the farm and quickly realized like you can't do it all. But the demand kept growing. And so now I run a farm cooperative. So it's this group of small farmers where we're creating this alternative food system. And while the food system and the health space is becoming more unsaturated, we're on a mission to resaturate intentionally and lower all of our PUFA intake by being very intentional with what we feed our livestock, how we raise our livestock. And that's where I am extremely passionate and obsessed, is going back to the old-fashioned ways of producing food and improving fatty acid profile of foods. So that's a brief summary of how I got to where I am today, which is like running Nourish Food Club with my sister and her husband.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. So I knew almost none of that. I basically just knew you were a farmer, and I saw you at some point, your stuff online, and I have pretty strong filters in my brain, I like to think, at least. And I ignore most people, but at some point I noticed the content you were putting out, and I was like, oh, this person's literate and sane. It actually makes sense that you have the background you do. I didn't actually know anything about your background other than you're this farmer girl on the internet that I kind of follow. And I like what you're doing with your farm, and I want to talk about that, but I want to talk a little bit about some of the stuff you just said. Like when you said you made these new eggs and people could eat eggs again, it sounded like what you were saying is people were eating eggs of some kind in the past and they were getting sick, or they learned that they couldn't eat eggs anymore. And then they stopped eating eggs. And then they started eating your eggs, which are different in ways we'll get into. Can you unpack that a little bit? What were the problems that you've heard people have with eggs that made them have to stop eating them?
Yeah, this is honestly probably one of the things that motivates me the most, is by changing what livestock eats, you can literally impact the digestibility of the final food product. And it just gives people so many more options and less food fear, and they feel more normal again. So if we take a step back, we were born into this current food system, but if we zoom out 100 years, soy wasn't a part of the food system, right? Like soy is a newcomer to agriculture, made possible by monocropping, chemical-based intensive agriculture that our government funds through subsidies. If we didn't have that program, it wouldn't be possible. And people don't realize the impact that has had on the fatty acid composition of our food system, but also the digestibility. So when it comes to an egg, what a chicken eats, the fats in the chicken's diet directly changes the fats in the egg. And so we've seen that with our eggs. Our eggs have 73% less linoleic acid per egg than organic pasture-raised, because even pasture-raised chickens are on conventional feed, and the normal feed these days is corn byproducts, soy, whatever's cheap, whatever's abundant out there, because that's what the current food system is designed to mass produce.
Yeah. So you're saying so there's like big factory farm chickens. They're inside living in a box all day. They can only eat the grain in the grain receptacle in front of them. But then there's pasture raised chickens that you might get those eggs at the store, those chickens at the store, and they're pasture raised, so they can go out to pasture, but they're still eating basically the same stuff largely. They might not be going out to pasture that often. And so they still are being affected by the fact that a lot of these grain-based feeds contain soy and those types of things.
Yep. Even pasture raised chickens, their diet is 70 to 90% feed. So it's great that they have pasture access, gives them vitamin D exposure. They can synthesize that, increase vitamin D in the eggs. They get their vitamin K1 from grasses, which they convert to vitamin K2 in the egg. More vitamin E in the egg yolk. But the fatty acid composition is directly changed by what they eat. And feed drives growth, feed drives production. And 70 to 90% of a pasture-raised chicken's diet comes from the feed. And that feed is largely the same across the country. And I'm not saying that this is any farmer's fault. This is literally just the system that has taken 50, 70, 80 years to get to where we are today. And it has changed food dramatically. And so there's the PUFA piece, right? What a chicken is eating in the feed will change the types of fat in the egg. But then then more linoleic acid, more polyunsaturated fats. And we know that there's literature pointing out that linoleic acid can directly disrupt gut health. And so I think that that's playing a role when eggs have higher levels of polyunsaturated fats. It can disrupt the villi and various gut lining structures, which can, if you have, leaky gut, that can lead to various particles, being released in the bloodstream, causing some digestive issues. So I think there's that piece. But then there's also soy proteins and corn byproducts can be passed directly from the feed into the egg yolk itself. Mm-hmm. So as an example, there's phytoestrogens. Soy is one of the highest sources of phytoestrogens. That can be problematic for many people in terms of digestion, and they don't realize that those phytoestrogens in the feed that the chickens are eating gets passed into the egg yolk. We have testing showing that as well. Our eggs don't have much of those at all, whereas eggs from chickens fed soy are much higher in phytoestrogens. And so I think that it's three things. It's the change in the fatty acid composition. So I personally feel gut distress when I go out to a restaurant and have seed oils, right? Sometimes you just accept, I'm going out to eat with family friends, but then whenever I know I have seed oils, there's some sort of gut disruption. Could that be also happening with eggs that are higher in linoleic acid? Potentially. But then two things that are definitely certain is that some of those soy proteins that can be a source of allergens for some people, those are passed into the egg.
Right.
And then also the phytoestrogens could also be allergenic for some individuals as well. So all of those are passed from feed into the egg yolk.
Yeah. I guess stepping back, the important thing for people to take, one of the important things for people to take from this is, when we eat animals like chicken meat or eggs, when we eat things from animals that we farm, what they eat really matters. What's inside of the animal is going to be dictated by what the animal itself was fed and what it was doing and all of these things. And, two eggs from two different sources can be very different from a nutritional standpoint, from a digestibility standpoint, your body's ability to actually absorb what's inside of it that you want from a nutrition standpoint. But also there could be other stuff in there that you don't want, things that you might be allergic to, things that might be endocrine disruptors. And, you mentioned a couple big ones here. We'll probably talk about PUFAs and linoleic acid. But the phytoestrogen thing with soy, I think some people think this is like an internet myth or something. It's like, no, there are actual phytoestrogens in soy, 100%. They will disrupt estrogen signaling. And estrogen signaling isn't just about sexual characteristics and that type of thing. It does all sorts of stuff, including a lot of important stuff in gut signaling. And that's
yes.
That's pretty well established biology.
It's so the problem I think that many of us face is that so many of the nutrition headliners that are in mainstream nutrition are just wrong, right? PUFAs are heart healthy. Saturated fat is bad for you. Women need more estrogen. there's all these things that people just take to heart and they don't question where they came from. And that has had profound impacts on the food system, because then people think, okay, if saturated fats are bad for us, we need to do whatever we can to lower the saturated fat content of our food. We need to do whatever we can to increase phytoestrogen exposure. And the problem is that when you dive into the literature, there is a lot of scary data showing the problems that arise when we are exposed to phytoestrogens at levels that we've never been exposed to. And that's why I think soy is so problematic. It adds 2 Ps. Actually, it adds 3 Ps. So something that we talk about at Nourish is the low P standard. That's our standard, low Ps. Unfortunately, food comes with baggage these days, and it's largely because of soy. So the 3 things that soy brings that all start with a P are PUFAs, polyunsaturated fats, phytoestrogens, and pesticides. So soy comes in this package of high PUFA, high phytoestrogen. That's just what a soy has. It doesn't matter if it's organic or non-organic. Soy is high in phytoestrogen and it's high in PUFAs. And then if we have non-organic soy and it's non-GMO or just conventional GMO soy, it is sprayed with pesticides a lot. So it's introducing this like baggage into our food. And I struggle talking about this because I think that animal foods are so nutrient dense. Everyone needs to be consuming animal foods. There are some differences based on how food is produced. And so I don't want to cause orthorexia or food fear. I just am here to talk about these things because these are variables that have drastically changed in the last 100 years. And we have customers that have never been able to eat pork before. They've never been able to eat eggs before without gut distress, rashes, severe acne, bloating, constipation, and then now they can. And it's based on what the livestock are fed. And so it's a difficult thing to discuss, but I think it's important as we think about the future of our food system, the consequences that have come from soy being like this foundation of our food system, because so much of the soy that we all see, we think that it goes towards feeding humans. No, most of that is exported or it's fed to livestock. And that's a problem. It's a big problem.
Yeah. Tell us the story of soybeans. Give us a bit of the history here. Why did they become like the big crop? I know that it's subsidized by the government. I know that, does it have to do with how easy soy is to grow? What are all the factors that made soy like such a popular crop for farmers to want to grow and for the government to want to subsidize? Why didn't other crops become as popular as soy? What's so special about it?
So soy used to be used for paint. And the reason being is it's so high in PUFAs, right? So those polyunsaturated fats oxidize so easily, which makes it a great paint source, right? So linseed oil, soybean oil were all combined to make a lot of paint. Then in the early 1900s, these like various chemical companies started coming up with petroleum-based solutions for paint. And then that led to, soy doesn't have as much of a market anymore. Let's figure out other ways to utilize this.
So they were using it for something. They had a pretty big supply of it because it was used for these paint applications. We then invented petroleum-based alternatives to those that were more economical. So then the people with all of these soy products were sitting on the surplus of soy and they had to figure out a new way to sell it or just eat the loss.
That is the start of it. Then it got significantly worse as we started getting into the world wars, and when we developed these huge manufacturing plants for wartime equipment, at the end of the wars, people were like, well, we've spent millions, if not billions of dollars on these things. We can't just let these plants sit here. They were turned into creating chemicals for agriculture. So one of the things about World War II is that it was our first very like chemical-based warfare. Well, they quickly realized, those chemicals that we developed to kill people in war, those kill pesky bugs in agriculture. And so the development of pesticides that came out of that wartime equipment, invention of these like very toxic chemical agriculture things, the emergence of Monsanto in these big agriculture companies, it all like kind of came together around the same time. And a lot of these chemicals don't work for many crops. And so they started developing these like alternatives to soy and realizing, oh, if we create these genetically modified versions, we can spray the crap out of them and they'll still live, and we can more easily mass produce things. So it became a, feed the world mindset where we need to maximize production because our population is growing. So essentially soybeans became this really easy option due to the chemicals that were being generated at that time. Whereas if you spray other crops, they would die.
Got it.
So it kind of came out of necessity.
They happen to be resilient with respect to these chemicals. Yeah. And those two things combined meant you could just generate a high volume of this particular crop.
Yep. So there's that piece. Then around the same time, the fear of saturated fats started happening.
Right.
And soy is high in polyunsaturated fats. And so if you read these like old agriculture literature, textbooks and various studies, you'll see pretty much every introduction says something along the lines of, since we now know that saturated fats are not good for us and polyunsaturated fats are heart healthy, we need to increase polyunsaturated sources in our food system. And so they started realizing that when you feed more soybean oil, that changes the types of fat in chickens, in pigs. The thing that they realized first was that the hardness of pig fat started to get softer and softer as they fed these things, which is a sign that pork fat was becoming more unsaturated.
Right.
So they started seeing that as a good thing. They also started seeing, oh, when we feed them these PUFA-rich soybean oils, they fatten quicker. Wow, this is going to increase our bottom line. We can get pork produced quicker, more of it.
Yeah, and this actually tells us something that I'll just put in people's heads right now. And I've written about this in a number of ways. The animals get fatter faster when you feed them polyunsaturated fatty acids. And we are animals too. So there's a connection there.
100%. What they did to animals is now happening to us on so many different levels. So that was it all just started to come together. And then honestly, soy does have beneficial protein. So I'm not saying that soy is all around a bad crop. It does provide protein that's needed for a monogastric animal. So chickens and pigs can't survive on grass alone. They're like us.
Yeah.
And so they do have to have an energy and a protein source. And that is one benefit of soy, is it does have a good amino acid profile relative to other options.
Yeah. So like a cow, they have multiple stomachs. They've got a different setup. They can just eat grass and they can make all the protein they need from grass. I mean, that's what a steak is. It's protein and muscle mass that was made out of grass, ultimately. A chicken is like us. They actually need to consume protein. And so that was one more reason why that became a favored thing to use in feeds, because you had all these animals like chickens and pigs that need to eat some protein.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
And so it's all these factors coming together. And then government subsidies started to promote this. And this is not the farmer's fault at all. It is the system that has come to be where it's at today, starting with various presidential campaigns that started doing, like the Green Revolution, where we need to feed the world, mass produce. And so they started providing subsidies, incentivizing farmers to produce these crops. And it goes so far that some farmers can't even get insurance if they don't grow these crops.
Right.
So it's so embedded.
Right. And in other words, you basically can't do business and stay competitive unless you are participating in this system in this way with these incentives. You will not make as much money, potentially not even be able to do business at all, if you're not using these subsidized crops and growing them and using them in this way. It makes sense, right? You have to do things as cheaply and efficiently as possible. If the price of your eggs is more expensive than the price of the other guy's eggs, I mean, all of these things make perfect sense as to why things moved in this direction. Basically, what you're saying is it's not the farmer's fault. The system's set up this way, but there was this sort of perfect storm of factors. And, we could speculate about how much of it was engineered this way and how much of it was just a natural organic thing, probably a mixture of both. But it just happened to be that the factors were you could make this crop and mass produce it, and the chemical companies could spray their crops with these chemicals and sell their chemicals and produce more feed, and you could use it for the chickens and the pigs and the cows, and it had protein in it as well. So like all these factors just conspired, and we had to feed the world. We want to be good people as well. So there was this sort of like moralistic spin on all of this, in addition to sort of the raw economics of it. And today we've got soy and everything.
Yeah, the fatty acid composition of our food system at every single level has changed. So obviously the types of fat that we're consuming, swap butter for margarine, seed oil epidemic, but then also the types of fats that animals are eating has completely changed too. And we're now seeing these epigenetic changes, right? These are, we're seeing our grandmas started changing the types of fat that they consumed. That impacts epigenetically our parents, and then our parents having us, and our metabolic rates are slowing down. This is well documented by Dr. John Speakman's lab. We see a decline in our body temperature. And then one of my favorite figures that I've ever created is I pulled data from various studies from like the early 1900s to today, is the fatty acid composition of humans has completely changed.
Oh, yeah.
So if you have a pie chart, I can send you this chart afterwards, a pie chart of a human in the early 1900s and a pie chart of us today, with three different things in the pie chart: polyunsaturated fat, saturated fat, and monounsaturated fat. We have significantly more polyunsaturated fat and significantly less saturated fat inside of us now. That is impacting how our body is producing energy at the cellular level every single day. And so these fat choices impact us very slowly over time. We don't see it necessarily right away, but as we are changing the internal environment inside of us, we're becoming a new species, kind of.
Yeah. So another way of saying that is people have not only become fatter over time, but the composition of their fat has changed. It has come more and more to resemble seed oil fat, basically, to be more polyunsaturated fat. Another thing that you said, two things you said I want to emphasize for people. One, these changes take time. And there's been studies that have documented and quantify this. If you swap out animal fat for seed oil fat, polyunsaturated fat, so people start eating polyunsaturated fat more and saturated fat less, the composition of their fat changes, but it takes a few years for it to like fully change and match their diet. So we're talking about changes that take years to develop, not things that happen overnight or even over weeks or months. It's many, many, many months and maybe even several years for these changes to unfold, including fat change and weight gain and stuff like that. The other thing I want to talk about just a little bit, and I want to make sure people understand this, is the relationship between polyunsaturated fat content of your tissues and your basal metabolic rate. So you said something there that people should know. At the population level and at the individual level, if you increase how much polyunsaturated fat is inside of you, your metabolic rate will go down. Your metabolism will basically slow down and you will burn through stuff more slowly. So think about that. If you eat more polyunsaturated fat and it helps animals get more fat and it slows down your metabolism, what's going to happen? It's going to be harder to lose that fat.
And the research is there. No one is acknowledging this. So the pro seed oil people, you see the people like guzzling seed oils out of the container, like, oh, I'm not afraid of seed oils. They are looking at 8 to 10 week human studies. It's not going to show in 8 to 10 weeks.
Right.
But then when you look in nature, what do squirrels eat when they need to enter hibernation?
Yeah.
PUFA rich nuts. So that changes their metabolic rate inside of them. And the research is there. Polyunsaturated fats and saturated fats are completely different structures. Of course, your cells are going to metabolize and use them differently. Polyunsaturated fats encourage more glycolytic metabolism. They discourage full oxidative phosphorylation, whereas saturated fats encourage and support more oxidative phosphorylation. When you are doing more polyunsaturated fatty acid breakdown, you are getting less ATP yield because you're relying more on inefficient fermentation glycolysis. You're using up more valuable oxygen. It's changing how our body is producing energy at the cellular level. This is downregulating the metabolic rate, which means it's easier to gain fat at a lower calorie intake. And Dr. John Speakman has this data showing that people have seen a decline in our basal metabolic rates, yet are exercising more and are eating the same amount.
Yeah. Again, like our basal metabolic rate is going down, our PUFA consumption is going up. People are, exercising more or as much as they used to by some measures in some of these studies. And yet, right, and yet they're not losing weight a lot of the time. And part of the puzzle here is their tissues are literally built out of different things than they used to be in previous generations. And it's affecting our basal metabolic rate, how much energy you're using and burning just every day, just even when you're sitting around. And I encourage people to go listen to the episode I did with John Speakman, because we go into some detail on this, but those are the facts. I mean, at the population level, our metabolic rates have been slowing down over time. And even our body temperatures, I believe, are going down a fair amount.
They are. And those are one and the same. If you've got a good basal metabolic rate, you have a high body temperature because you're burning fuel, which generates heat. When you have a low metabolic rate, you're storing fuel as fat.
Yeah. So how big is the difference? Let's talk a little bit about like the chickens that you guys raise and the eggs you produce compared to like the average chicken meat and eggs that you'll find in a grocery store. So the stuff that's coming from like the big factory farms, basically, compared to yours. What are the most salient ways that the nutrition profiles differ between eggs made your way and eggs made the most popular way?
So when you look at the USDA food database, you can pull up that eggs have great micronutrient levels. All eggs are nutritious. They're great choline, biotin, selenium, various B vitamins, fat-soluble vitamins. All of them contain that. It's just conventional eggs do contain more baggage that our bodies have to process and deal with. The biggest problem is the USDA food database. When were those tests performed? We don't. They don't disclose that well, and so that those could have been done in the 90s, and so much has changed since then. So the biggest thing is the fatty acid composition. We do have some more micronutrients, like we've got more B vitamins tested, and that's just because when a chicken is in a box in a building only eating grain, the nutrients deposited in the egg are only going to be what's provided in the grain. You just did a podcast episode with Dr. Stefan Van Vliet on phytonutrients. The same thing happens with chickens and egg yolks. There's data documenting that when chickens are in a confinement building, they're obviously not consuming diverse forage and foliage where there are phytonutrients present in those grasses, which then get converted and put into the egg yolk. When chickens are raised out in pasture, they're going to have more phytonutrients that those things don't show up on a nutrition label. And honestly, phytonutrients aren't as well understood as vitamins and minerals, but they are a very beneficial nutrient class that I think we're going to be learning a lot more about over the next couple of years. But it's those colors that you see in fruits and vegetables that provide well-documented like anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer compounds. So more of those show up when chickens are truly pasture-raised. More fat-soluble vitamins show up. But the biggest difference is that fatty acid composition. It's 73% less linoleic acid. So basically,
how much linoleic acid are we talking about? So let's call it the normal egg versus your egg. What is it compared to like a teaspoon of sunflower oil or something like that?
Yeah. So this is I generated this figure. So I did fatty acid analysis testing with our eggs, organic pasture-raised, Vital Farms, and then just standard conventional cage-free at the grocery store. I've collaborated with Michigan State a number of times on this for various like research papers and fatty acid testing. So our eggs, per 3 eggs, our eggs contain 0.9 grams of linoleic acid. Organic pasture-raised is 3.4 to 3.9 grams. And so then if you pull it back and break it down to
almost a fourfold difference between the organic pasture raised and like Vital Farm style chicken eggs and yours.
And it's because of the soy. It is 100% because of the soy. Right. I know who manufactures Vital Farms feed. So I know what's in their feed. And they put it on their website too. People just don't read those details. They think that chickens can just eat grass and pasture. And I'm not saying that Vital Farms doesn't do a great job. It's just a clear example of like when these things are mass produced, it does change the fatty acid composition of the yolk. Right. And so in 2 eggs of organic pasture raised or store bought contains the same amount of polyunsaturated fat as 1 tablespoon of canola oil.
Yeah.
And I think that if someone were to stay at 2 eggs a day, I think that that'd be totally fine. But you see people eating 6, 12 eggs per day, and that polyunsaturated fat consumption is going to add up. Another problem is that polyunsaturated fats are unstable because they have those double bonds. And there's a lot of research showing that when you expose those to heat during cooking, those oxidize, which can introduce, MDA, H&E, all these lipid oxidation byproducts, but then it can also oxidize the cholesterol in the eggs.
Yeah.
And so now we're consuming, again, these baggage things that we don't necessarily want or need more of. And so if you are going to be consuming more of these conventional eggs, definitely do like low heat cooking if you're doing this very regularly.
Yeah. One thing I've noticed, I think some people have noticed this, but many people might not notice this, but look for this the next time you go to the grocery store. So I might take 2 cartons of eggs off the shelf, brand A and brand B. One of them might be pasture-raised, one of them might be cage-free. So these are different eggs from different places, different farming conditions, but I look at the nutrition facts and it's the same exact numbers, 70 calories per. What's going on there? Why are the numbers? They can't be the same. Why are they the same on all of them?
Oh, this is a huge problem with the food system at large. Those nutrition facts are copy and pasted from an online database. And so anyone can use those and just put them on their label because it's an egg. An egg's an egg, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that Vital Farms always responds to me on Instagram about, like, hey, look at our nutrition facts on the back of our eggs. It shows only this, this, this. It shows that on every single egg. It shows the exact same on every single egg at the grocery store. It's not yours. It's some weird database thing that they've just put on the back.
Yeah, it's not that batch of eggs. It's not even that brand of eggs. It's just the egg numbers in the egg database that everyone gets to use because they make eggs.
Yep. And no one knows when that testing was done.
Right. It could have been done 30 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And who knows? It probably was.
Yeah.
It wasn't yesterday.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can't actually literally trust those numbers,
No.
but all the eggs are going to be different depending on how they're made. Cage-free, pasture-raised, this, that, or the other. What if I'm just looking at an egg? What can I, as a consumer, what can I look for when I crack open the egg in terms of its consistency, in terms of the color of that yolk? What does that tell someone about the potential nutrient content if they want to use that method to try and get around the fact that, those numbers are copied and pasted on the nutrition label?
It's really difficult. You can't. Eggs have become a commodity these days. And in fact, when you go to like Home Depot and you're looking to figure out what color you want to paint your wall, and you can get those like paint, I don't know what they're called, but it's essentially you can see a bunch of different shades on this piece of paper and you're like, oh, I love this color. I'm going to bring this home and test it on my wall to see what it looks like. It's like a color fan, right? You can do the same thing with egg yolks. And there's what's called a yolk color fan that is now out in the feed industry where a producer can choose exactly what color they want their yolk to look like. And then an additive can be added to their feed to make the yolk that exact color.
So it's plug and play. It's not even like they have to grow marigolds and diligently feed them in the pasture. It's like you can literally just choose it.
Yeah. And honestly, if a feed includes marigold, there's a lot of benefits to that. It will probably have more like lutein and various compounds like that can improve eye health, various things like health promoting compounds. The problem is it then just becomes deceiving because the customer thinks, oh, bright orange yolk, those chickens were raised out on pasture. And it doesn't tell you anything about the fatty acid composition. Like you can't visually see the fatty acid composition inside of a yolk.
Right. So there's certain things you might be able to discern from the color, but the whole thing is gameable. And so you effectively, it's kind of a useless metric, even though in theory it would work.
Yeah. I don't want to I'm very proud of our eggs. I think that our eggs are the best out there. What our team has accomplished, I'm obsessed with. But what I want to educate people on is there's no difference between like pasture raised at a grocery store and your local pasture raised farm. And your local farm is probably going to have better quality than these like huge big brands. I just want people to know what they're buying, right? We blindly trust these labels, and it's just benefiting the big industrial food complexes that we have today.
What So the chickens can be fed different things. The default diet, the most common diet is the grain-based diet. It's got a lot of soy in it. That
Yeah.
leads to certain nutritional issues that we've touched on. There's
Well,
cage free.
there's
Okay, go ahead.
there's one more feed ingredient that is increasingly becoming problematic. Have you heard of dried distiller grains?
No.
Okay. Soy is a huge issue. Truthfully, corn kernels, like old-fashioned corn kernels, aren't that big of a problem. Corn is actually low in fat. Like corn has been a part of our ancestors' diets for thousands of years, right? The process of nixtamalization, the Mayans making corn tortillas. The problem is modern corn varieties are much higher in fat, higher in linoleic acid. But the biggest issue is that animals aren't even really fed corn anymore. They're fed corn byproducts. And that's because of the ethanol as fuel industry.
Mm.
So, corn kernel has starch, minerals, fat, and protein. When we are creating this biofuel, ethanol as fuel, we're pulling the starch out, and that starch is used to create fuel. So, what does that leave us with? That leaves us with the fat, the minerals, and the protein, a concentrated source of that. That's called dried distiller grain solubles, DDGS. That is being fed to livestock. And so this is a byproduct of this like clean energy. I'm not political. I'm not speaking on behalf of whether clean energy is good or bad. This is just a consequence because
Yeah.
if we're mass producing corn across the country, pulling the starch out, of course they're going to use that remaining concentrated source of linoleic acid. So that's being fed to livestock too. And that is definitely there's
Right. Basically, as a consequence of industrial progress and the
yeah.
invention of new things that cause us to use these commodities in different ways, we're a byproduct of these industrial processes is we get these sort of concentrated, artificially concentrated versions of foods. And animal bodies, our bodies, cows' bodies, chicken bodies, animal bodies didn't evolve to extract pure concentrated amounts of all of these things. It evolved to eat whole foods, and we extract nutrition from those types of food matrices. So just it's fun to, even if you were to get all of the nutrients right and you were to make a Frankenstein food that had the exact same composition in terms of the mass of all of the macro and micronutrients, it's still a different physical entity. And therefore animal bodies would probably not extract the nutrition to the same degree or in the same way they would otherwise. And so even though it's got the same mass of nutrients inside of it that might be indicated on a label, it's not going to hit your body the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. And even the mass feed producers in this country recognize this. Like in many research studies, it says, well, we want to increase the polyunsaturated fat content of our food and lower the artery clogging saturated fat. And we can do that through increasing the PUFA of the feed. Like they acknowledge that, but then they follow it up right away and they say, but the PUFAs easily oxidize inside the feed, so we need to artificially increase our vitamin E levels in the feed to prevent that oxidation.
Right.
Well, shoot, by the time that chicken eats the feed, the vitamin E is already used up, so that oxidation is happening inside the chicken, and then so they acknowledge that there are these problems, but they're forcing it because there's this belief that saturated fat is bad for us is so deep. It's so deep.
Yeah, yeah. What So the other thing I want to touch on, so we talked about the fatty acid composition of all this stuff and how the fatty acid composition of soy it's got high PUFA content, lower saturated fatty acid content. We've touched on like why that narrative evolved a little bit. People can do deep dives elsewhere. I've done episodes on this. I've done a lot of writing on this. There was the whole demonization of saturated fat and the promotion of PUFAs as heart healthy. The other piece I want to ask you about is the pesticide side of this. So maybe the biggest pesticide that people have heard about, I'm guessing this is the most common one out there, is glyphosate. Can you just give people a bird's eye view? Why are we using glyphosate, and what do we know about glyphosate? Is it actually toxic to animal bodies, or is it only toxic to plants? What is the narrative there? And then what is the reality as you see it?
Yeah. Again, 100 years ago, chemical-based pesticides didn't exist. And after World War II, we had to make use of all these big chemical buildings that we created for the war. And they realized, oh, these chemical weapons of war actually work really well in killing bugs. So one of those compounds that came out of it is glyphosate, and glyphosate targets this pathway inside of bacteria and plant species called the shikimate pathway. So what the regulators tell us is human cells don't have the shikimate pathway. It doesn't impact human cells. Well, we are equal bacteria cells than we are human cells. Like we have equal amounts of bacteria cells and human cells inside of us. And those bacteria cells have the shikimate pathway. So there are now very well documented health impacts of glyphosate. The research
what you're
study,
saying is the glyphosate can directly impact, say, gut microbes of various kinds directly through the pathway that it's designed to interact with in plants and thereby affect us, even though our human cells don't have that particular protein inside of them.
Yep. Oops.
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I want to point out here too for people is even if that wasn't true, that is true. Even if that wasn't true, we know for a fact in animals that don't have this pathway that glyphosate's designed to act on, glyphosate's metabolized into other things that are toxic that cause inflammation in our brains and all sorts of nasty stuff. So there's no rational argument for glyphosate being innocuous to us or any other animal.
Well, a few very interesting things just happened recently. In December of 2025, the gold standard paper that was used by regulators to say glyphosate is safe was redacted. It was created 25 years ago, and it's been used for 25 years to set policy in agriculture and our food system. It was redacted, saying it didn't contain factual information. It suppressed certain information. There was conflict of interest. Like, wow, that has fundamentally changed our environment, our food system, bodily states. Glyphosate, there's so much research showing that glyphosate will cause gut dysbiosis because pathogenic bacteria have this certain enzyme that can fight off glyphosate, whereas beneficial bacteria don't have that same enzyme. And so higher glyphosate exposure can cause like gut dysbiosis. It can also damage components of our mitochondria along the electron transport chain. So it's been shown to lower energy production inside of our cells. A lot of that research was suppressed. And then the unfortunate reality is that the government only has certain amounts of funding for various things. And so it has to put funding in certain projects. The funding towards pesticide testing has historically always been very, very low.
Yeah.
And I have this very deep rabbit hole blog post about how this big project in the 1990s was started to test the endocrine disruption effect of pesticides. To this day, the project hasn't been completed, over 30 years later. And so all these compounds are being released into our food system without adequate testing. And it comes down to just not enough funding going to that place. And I think that that's because of lobbying, right? Like big agriculture has spent so much money making sure that it is locked in the way that it is. Bayer bought Monsanto. So now Bayer, the biggest pharmaceutical company, is now the biggest agriculture company in this country. Bayer now has over 50% share in hundreds of agriculture companies that own the proprietary seeds, soybeans, corn, GMO. They own those seeds. So if a farmer tries to save those and replant them instead of buying from them, they get sued and run out of business.
And just so people know, when you say those proprietary seeds, basically we're talking about seeds that are engineered to be resistant to glyphosate, so you can spray as much on them as possible to make as much of these crops as possible. And so the exact crops that we're growing the most of are also the things that have the most glyphosate on them.
100%. Talk about the best business model, right? Like you get paid on both sides of the equation. And the problem is like biology is so much smarter than any of us will ever be. Like we will never understand the intricacy of Mother Nature. And that's okay. I think we can just work with her. The problem is we are now trying to fight biology with chemistry and we will always lose. And so you look back at the last 70, 80, 100 years, one chemical was working until it stopped. Then super weeds started developing that became resistant to that chemical. Oh, time to develop the next chemical, time to develop the next chemical, next chemical, next chemical. It is a great business model for these big agriculture companies. And we are becoming like the test subjects for that because there's not enough government regulation. I don't think that more and more regulation is necessarily the answer. I think it's becoming more of an empowered consumer base and understanding where we are exposed to these things, who is using these things, who isn't.
Yeah.
And then you dive into organic eggs and conventional eggs can have levels of glyphosate higher than the EPA allows. And you're like, wait, how does that work?
Yeah. So they spray it on the soybeans. We grow a lot of soybeans. We feed it to the chickens. It gets into the chickens and into the chicken eggs. And then there's glyphosate and all that stuff. One of the things I learned last year that was disturbing, even though it was interesting, from a man named Ramon Velasquez at Arizona State University. He basically showed the experiment is basically you expose animals to glyphosate, then you see what happens in their brains. You expose animals to glyphosate for a little bit, just for a little while. And then you stop and you wait a long time. It would be years in a human that this would equate to, but you're waiting weeks and months in a lab rodent. And basically you could find this toxic metabolite of glyphosate in their brains weeks and months later. It's driving neuroinflammation and neurodegeneration. So the glyphosate is indirectly causing it by way of its metabolite, AMPA. But the thing is, the sort of, let's call it the detox pathway of the body, the way that you combat this inflammation is actually a pathway that is dependent on choline. And so choline is a nutrient that some people know about, but not everyone. And you need it to sort of combat the toxic effects of this glyphosate metabolite. But what's kind of interesting and disturbing about that is so many people have moved to more plant-based diets over the years that choline really only comes from animal products. So the people that are going to be most exposed to the glyphosate that would cause that inflammation are the most likely to be deficient in the choline, which is what the body, the part of the pathway that the body needs to clear that stuff out. So there's all of these horrible loops that society has constructed where people are exposed to things, they're told they're okay, but they're not okay, and then their body's actually nutrient deprived in exactly the ways it would need to actually sort of get rid of these toxins.
It's amazing how much data there is out there showing the problems, but it's it really is suppressed. I just pulled up my article on glyphosate, and it's been shown to inhibit both complex 2 and complex 3 of the electron transport chain. It also acts as a chelating agent, which is a good thing for agriculture, but not inside of us, right? So it's going to chelate metal ions like iron, copper, zinc, manganese, calcium, magnesium, all of which are critical cofactors of energy production. What
you're saying is when you say chelate, you mean it's going to sort of stick to those things so that your body can actually absorb those minerals as readily.
Yeah. And I know it's a rat liver model, but glyphosate inhibited the energy production function by 46% in the mitochondria of rat liver. So just like these various things, it lowers energy production in human sperm cells, lowers the speed of sperm motility. And there's so much research out there. It's just suppressed.
It doesn't even make sense from first principles to people that try and argue that, right? Because we said it before. So the argument that's been put forward by industry and then scientists who either are talking on their behalf or else aren't as smart as they think they are, they'll say, oh, well, it's engineered to work on this plant pathway. We don't have that pathway, therefore we're okay. That is just so silly and stupid if you know anything about biology fundamentals. There's a bajillion proteins and pathways and molecules inside of us. There's no way one organic compound is not going to interact with anything else in the body.
Exactly.
That's just insane.
Exactly. And then earlier we were talking about the lowered metabolic rate and increased amount of fat storage. Pesticides contribute to that. So it's this it's this feed forward cycle, not in a good way, where it's impacting lipogenesis, fat creation. It's turning on, things like D6D and various enzymes that increase fat storage and lower fuel utilization. And so it's compounding on top of what the PUFAs are already doing. And again, it goes back. Soybean has both. Soybean has the PUFAs. Both. Yeah.
It's one of the perfect things. The polyunsaturated fatty acids like linoleic acid will ultimately be turned into things like endogenous cannabinoids, which increase fat in the body. It's going to go fat. You're going to go into fat storage mode more, the more of that you have, period. That's just the way the biology works. And you're saying on top of that, the soybeans, which also have those fats, have these pesticides, and they essentially push you in the same direction by other means.
Yep. And I think the kind of big picture thing here is I really believe, I understand that everyone has a very tight budget. They have to meet themselves where they're at right now. But if we were to analyze the three different macronutrients that we all consume to some degree, various people consume different amounts of each. I think that fat quality is one of the most important things because of it. You become the fat that you eat, right? Whereas carbohydrates, those get broken down into energy relatively quickly. Like stored glycogen is different than the phospholipid structure inside of our cellular membranes. And so I think that one of the biggest changes and the biggest problems with our food system is the quality of our fats have gone down, and that is really impacting our metabolic rates. And we're seeing that firsthand, right? Obesity rates are on the rise. We're dying sooner. Our life expectancy is going down. Infertility is on the rise. Chronic disease rates are on the rise. Like, this food system isn't working for us. And I think it's largely because our fat quality has gone down. Like,
yeah. One of the wild things I learned the other day with Stefan Van Vliet, who that's an episode that actually will go really well with this one for people, because he basically analyzes what's actually in grass-fed beef versus grain-fed beef versus plant-based beef. And, we talk about all of that stuff. So there's a lot of synergy between that episode and this episode.
He was at University of Illinois in grad school when I was at University of Illinois for grad school, and his wife, I was good friends with his wife.
Yeah.
Sierra. So
yeah. But one of the things he mentioned that kind of blew me away is we were talking about phytoestrogens, plant estrogen-like compounds that can disrupt estrogen signaling sometimes, at least at the right dose. These are called isoflavones. They can be found in soy and other things. He was telling me how in, I think, sheep or goats, if they only eat clover, like maybe, I don't know, for whatever reason, maybe there's only clover in a pasture because there just is. If they only eat clover, it has like a lot of these isoflavones. And so they get a huge dose of these phytoestrogens, and it causes infertility in the goats. And like, it's like, I'm not saying that's the explanation for everything in terms of human fertility issues, but we are consuming an evolutionarily unprecedented level of these phytoestrogens, which are mixing up our hormone signaling in complicated and poorly understood ways. And it's totally unsurprising that we're having fertility issues. And I'm sure there are other reasons for this, but part of the equation is that we're ingesting all of these phytoestrogens and other endocrine disruptors.
Yes. And they all compound on each other. And you unfortunately see people chugging down flax these days. And flax is added to so many products like breads and supplements, and the two highest sources of phytoestrogens are flax and soy.
Yeah.
Flax was never traditionally used as a regular food source. It was used as a paint. So if you look at what flax is, it is a fiber plus an oil. Mm-hmm. The fiber was used to make clothes, linen.
Yep.
The oil was extracted to make paint and various varnishes and things like that.
Right.
And now it's a health food, exposing us to phytoestrogens that we've never been exposed to at this level. And there is actually so much research showing this. Dr. Connolly, Dr. Ray Peat, Dr. Wendy are some of the few people that are like raising the flag on this, because there's people saying that they're so safe and it's the answer to curing breast cancer and all these things. But there's alarming research out there about the dangers of regularly. It's not like a one-time thing. It's this day to day to day regular consumption over time.
Yeah.
That, like you said, there's data in sheep showing, let's just make these sheep infertile by giving them excessive amounts of clover. There's a lot of data out there. There was one research study from 2024 that said that the estrogenic and endocrine disrupting compounds of phytoestrogens are worse than plastics.
Yeah. If people really want to trip out, so linoleic acid, that's the omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acid. That's the seed oil fat. Let's call it seed oil fat. That's the most common one. Look up linoleum and how linoleum is made, and then go read about linoleic acid. And you'll start, like, you've already mentioned this, Ashley, at a couple points. A lot of these things, before we started marketing them as foods, they were used for these industrial processes that will make you go, wait a minute, what was this used for? And now we're eating it?
Yep. And livestock are eating it because it makes them fat, and they can fatten up quicker and cheaper.
Yeah. And I want to emphasize this because it's just true. It's just in the literature. It's just so obviously true. People don't realize it yet. It's not just that linoleic acid is obesogenic. in animals, this is the most obesogenic macronutrient. If you give an animal a high linoleic acid diet, it will get fatter than if you give it a high saturated fat and ultra high fructose diet. It will get fatter than if you give it other diets. It's one of the, if not the best diet, the high linoleic acid, high seed oil fat diet at making animals fat. We give it to farm animals, they get fatter faster so that you got, cheaper cuts of meat in the grocery store. The biology there works largely the same in us too.
So this is really sad, but the reality is that conventional chicken, those chickens fatten so quickly because how modern food is designed that if those chickens aren't processed soon, they will die of heart attacks because they fatten up so quickly.
So the chickens will die of heart attacks even though we're feeding them the so-called heart healthy fats?
Exactly. So they have to be butchered around that 6 to 7 week. If they go much longer than that, they're going to die. And it's so unnatural because of the feed composition that now there's been some genetic altering to Cornish cross hens where like they do have really high feed conversion rates. But if they didn't have that high PUFA dry distiller grains and soybean and vegetable oil in their feeds, they wouldn't fatten up as quicker. And that would mean that Tyson and all these big chicken companies, it would cost them more.
Right.
And the problem is now these quote advancements in agriculture has fundamentally skewed what we value as food. And this makes it very hard to be a small farmer because the cost of conventional meat is hidden in our subsidies.
Right. I mean, it's literally subsidized. It's like
two years
literally
ago,
subsidized.
2 years ago, I do have some, I'm in like the 10, 15 minutes away from me is like one of the biggest like seed manufacturers of like corn and soy. And there are conventional row crop farmers out in that area. A few years ago, it was cheaper to not plant anything. Don't plant your field with corn or soy and get the subsidy and insurance check than it was to plant the corn or soy.
Right. It's just once you just see it and it's just literally insane. It's like it's cheaper to not do anything.
And I think that there's great things happening with some policy changes, but this is so embedded into our agriculture. There are farmers out there that have purchased like millions of dollars of farm machinery to harvest soybeans and plant soybeans. What are we going to do about them if all of a sudden we just like remove that market? I don't think that that's the answer, but I do think that as we like in health conscious circles, the more that we can support small regenerative farmers, like the better off the food system will be in 10 to 15 years from now. It's just really hard for people to see. And I get it.
One of the things I want to ask you about is, so I want to ask you about like the economics and the costs here and stuff. It's like, okay, your eggs presumably are somewhat more expensive than other eggs. So like, how do you guys stay in business? Why should people buy those? Blah, 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 blah. The way I want to go into this is I want people thinking about the idea of malnutrition and obesity and overeating, because a lot of people will naturally think of those things as like opposites. Like if I'm eating a lot and I'm becoming fat, I'm not malnourished, right? Because I'm eating too much. But actually, it's very possible, and this is just very true of a lot of people walking around. It's possible to be obese and have a lot of body fat and also be malnourished, even though you're getting enough food mass and calories inside of you. And one of the things I'll just share here was from a recent episode with Francis Sladek, a scientist who works on soybean oil related stuff. Basically, long story short, give some animals soybean oil, give some animals beef tallow as much as they want to eat. They both get fat. Their body weight is the same weight. So they both experience the same level of weight gain. But the soybean fed animals, even though they're getting fat, they have more than they can eat as much as they want. They've got enough food. They have vitamin B deficiency in their liver. So something is breaking inside of them because of the soybean that they're eating. And it's basically causing them to be internally malnourished with respect to vitamin B1, I think, even though they're getting fat and they have as much to eat as they want. So there's a lot of what I'm getting to here is.
Wait, let's hold on. Let's nerd out on that really quickly because I just had a thought. So polyunsaturated fats are going to increase fermentation glycolysis pathway. When you rely more on glycolysis, you have increased levels of lactic acid. Your bodies use up B vitamins to
Yes.
dispose of excess lactic acid.
Yeah.
When you do oxidative phosphorylation, which happens when you consume higher saturated fats diet, lower PUFA diets, you get beneficial carbon dioxide as a byproduct, not lactic acid. So maybe that's one of the reasons.
That's a plausible explanation for why that's the case. But
Yeah.
the empirical
But
fact
regardless.
is, yeah, you get the soybean oil, and even though they get fatter, they've got ad lib access to food as much as they want. They are still malnourished. Their livers
Yeah.
don't have enough B vitamins. Something is running down their B vitamin supplies. So the way I want people to think about this is it's actually possible to change what you eat such that, you know, the cost of the individual foods might be higher. So you're paying more per steak, more per carton of eggs, but actually you will eat a lower overall mass of food and be less malnourished. In other words, it's possible to eat less food and become more nourished if you eat foods with a certain composition and not others. And so I guess what I'm coming to here with respect to you, Ashley, is like when you think about the costs here and how to talk to people about like, why should they spend a little bit more money on this? It feels to people like they're getting a bad deal, right? Like they're losing out on something. But actually, in a sense, even though it's going to cost you more per carton of eggs, from your body's standpoint, from a nutrition standpoint, you're actually getting more bang for your buck if your body's actually using more of that nutrition than it is for the cheaper eggs.
Yes. And on top of that, people don't question the cost of supplements. But if you take a look at people's monthly supplement bills, it's astronomical. And so if you can eat better quality food and not rely on supplement as much, I guarantee you will lower your overall cost and budget on terms of like your health.
How much does a carton of your eggs cost compared to?
Yep. We recently lowered our price. So we were one small farm back in 2021. And in order to increase supply, rather than creating a factory on my farm, we've then just duplicated at all of our farm partners. So every farm partner is a small regenerative farm. We're not a factory. And so we are a old-fashioned farm cooperative. So each farm, I get my feed delivered to each farm. And so it's the same model. I'm helping other farmers revitalize small regenerative farms, and we can keep quality the same by doing that model. By improving our logistics, we've been able to lower the cost of our eggs just a few weeks ago. So we ship directly to your door, which is very different than going to a store and picking up a 10-cent carton. So we have FedEx, we have package protection. Eggs are some of the most fragile things to exist. So we have a lot more costs in there. And we also pay our farmers very well. Their costs are higher because our feed ingredients aren't government subsidized because we don't use corn and soy. So all of these things are adding up to higher costs. For our egg subscribers, our costs are $14.99 per dozen. I think that is pretty good given that it is shipped to your door, includes package protection, FedEx costs, delivery. Our margins are very low on eggs. That's not the point. But the more that we can have people support this type of model, the more we can support non-corn and soy agriculture, right? So yes, we'll have more small farmers with chickens. Those chickens will need more feed, which means we'll need to swap acres of corn and soy for alternative feed ingredients, which honestly can vary region to region. We're so much of the industry is like, well, if they don't eat corn or soy, how are they going to grow? Yeah. They've grown for thousands of years using various grains that regions had available. Like the Scots had oats. Down south, it was more rice. There's so many different options.
What is the feed that you guys use? And then also what do chickens eat when they just get to run around? Like, what are all the things that they eat naturally?
Yeah. So many people think that chickens can just go outside and get everything that they need from pasture. If you want that type of egg, that chicken is going to maybe lay an egg, very few eggs. So the cost is going to be very high. It's also not very humane to the chicken because you're not providing the nutrients that chicken needs. So a supplemental feed is the more humane approach. It's also something that chickens have relied on for 8,000 years. We've domesticated chickens for 8,000 years. So they came from jungle fowl in the jungle. They found some grain processing plants. And so in various regions throughout the country, they've relied on human grain supplementation for 8,000 years. Grains aren't bad, but not all grains are the same. And we see that today. And so chickens do require, and they've relied on that for quite some time. So the most ideal thing for a chicken is having some blades of grass, like literally ingesting grass, because that's beneficial fiber inside of them. It's giving them vitamin K1, phytonutrients. They also like insects and bugs, which is going to give them protein. And then they do need an energy source, because if you look on pasture, there's not much energy. That's just fiber and protein. You need a fat source, you need a carbohydrate source. And so chickens have relied on some grain supplementation for thousands of years. And I think that that's a little bit of a misunderstanding, because people see pasture-raised eggs and they think, oh, a chicken is like a cow. They'll just go out and find what they need on pasture. And that would not be, that chicken would get sick very quickly because they
Yeah.
don't have enough energy.
Yeah. Interesting. What so so you ship eggs to people? Like, is that that works, obviously? I mean, naturally I would think that would be very, very difficult to do.
Oh, we've had our extreme challenges, but we've recently like improved our shipping and logistics on the back end. We got a nice like package deal, so we relayed those costs to our subscribers. It's been a lot of experimentation, and if anyone listens to this that is one of our like OG subscribers, they know we've gone through some hard times on that, but yeah, we feel pretty confident in our method now. Always looking to improve as more and more people are expecting direct delivery, right? With like everyone's been Amazon. And so there's a lot more packaging solutions that are coming up as more and more companies are starting to recognize this. So I think that we can improve on that over time. But yeah, we feel pretty confident on it, and we provide package protection. So if there is a disaster and a FedEx truck wants to play basketball with your box, we can cover that too. But that's something that I'm trying to navigate. Is a lot of people are, especially the young generation, they're expecting direct home delivery for everything. Uber Eats, Instacart. They don't want to drive to farms anymore. They expect their Amazon delivery with delivered that day. They place the order. And so how do we convenience wins with humans? That's just our nature. And how do we keep up with that while still providing very healthy food? And that's something that I'm kind of fascinated with. And it's a challenge, but I think that I'm not for everyone. There are people that have amazing relationships with their farmers around them. They've got great options, and that is incredible. Keep doing that. But for someone that doesn't have, like maybe they're in a food desert, or they don't have access to a good farmer, or they can't drive an hour to a farmer, then how do we navigate those type of challenges? That's difficult. And so solving that problem of shipping and logistics, I think, is an important piece to be able to provide healthy food options, even in this like modern times of convenience.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit more about, so when you were back in school and you were having some health issues, talk a little bit more about that. How did those issues resolve? What were you doing? What were the changes you made that seemed to be the ones that actually helped you resolve those issues? And what was going on there with your health? And just try and tie that, if you can, to the things that might be going wrong with people's health more generally, that they might expect to be fixed by eating whole foods that are kind of sourced and made in the ways that you guys are doing, as opposed to the stuff that's at the typical grocery store.
Yeah. The really, really sad thing is that mother's breast milk has completely changed fatty acid composition wise. Like I was talking earlier about having the pie chart of saturated, monounsaturated, and PUFA. Mother's breast milk today is directly impacted by what they eat. And so you can literally change the makeup of a child based on your fatty acid composition of your breast milk. Now that's sad, that's scary, that's terrifying, but it's also so empowering, because by making like changes now, you can impact what your breast milk will look like for your future child. And so I think a lot of us are kind of born into situations where we may be PUFA overloaded from the start. That doesn't mean we're doomed, right? But I think if I reflect on what my parents were eating when I was born, what I ate as a child, I think that I was very PUFA'd. And I always thought that I was eating healthy because I was listening to the Harvard health food pyramid, right? I'm going to use margarine. I'm going to use Better Balance, crack, whatever, seed oils, heart healthy PUFAs. regularly could use those growing up. I ate a lot of nuts and seeds growing up. I
Mhm.
avoided red meats like the plague, and I only ate chicken and pork.
Right. And
I
meaning the animals whose fat is basically seed oil fat.
Exactly. So I think that a big issue is that I was overloaded from a young age. I ate out a lot as a young
Yeah.
child
Yeah.
on seed oils, and I think that that's the case for a lot of people.
Right.
And so, a few things. My metabolic rate was probably so down regulated at such a young age, and I easily gained weight at that time. I had very cold fingers and hands, so lower body temperature, lower metabolic rate. And I wasn't eating enough food because if I ate more food, then I would gain weight easier. So this negative spiral of not being able to eat more. When you eat less, your metabolism down regulates to protect you. So I think it was a few combinations, wasn't eating enough, and I ate just a lot of PUFAs. And so I probably was PUFA overloaded. And in grad school, I discovered Dr. Ray Peat, and that's where I learned about beneficial saturated fats, the harm of polyunsaturated fats. And then that opened the door to so many other people who are talking about this now. And so returning back to traditional food was the thing for me. I found a local farmer there. I started eating red meat again. I started eating tallow and suet, which I don't eat as much
Yeah.
anymore. But
And give us a sense for the timeline here. Obviously,
yeah,
you didn't like make a change on Tuesday so that
yeah.
you're eating different foods than you were on Monday, and then like you just felt great the next day. What was the time course here where you started to notice a difference in your body that you could really see? Are we talking weeks? Are we talking a couple
No,
of
and
years?
that's the unfortunate thing. It did take a few years. And are you familiar with like the IIFYM, if it fits your macros?
Oh no.
It's very much like so I believe in macro counting, especially if like physique goals or body composition changes, like calculating your carbs, fat, and your protein intake and shooting for a certain range. Well, I was like really into that. And I thought that a fat was a fat, a carb was a carb, a protein was a protein.
Right.
And so I was eating like back then, like Pop Tarts. You can fit Pop Tarts into your macros. You can fit like uh, Chick-fil-A into your macros. And so so much of the fat that I was consuming was
Right.
polyunsaturated
You
fat.
were just thinking at the level of fat. You weren't
Yeah.
differentiating between the polyunsaturated, the
Yep.
monounsaturated, and so forth.
Yep.
And it just happened to
Yep.
be,
Yep.
as it is for a lot of people, that most of the fat was PUFAs.
Yep. And so then you've got this like PUFA rich environment inside of me, low metabolic rate, and then throw that individual into a very stressful environment of graduate school. I played D1 golf in college, mechanical engineering. That combination of just not having a good metabolic rate, not being good at producing energy, a lot of life stress. I think that that was like the culmination. And then in graduate school, over the course of a few years, I started to see huge improvements. And that lines up with the half-life of linoleic acid, which is like 600 days or something, which basically means that to have meaningful fatty acid composition changes inside of your body, it takes years. And that sucks. It does. It sucks. I wish it was faster. I do think that there are some interesting ways that one can resaturate. I'm kind of fascinated in that. I think that some dietary fats like C15-0 can help displace some fatty acids. And then also there's some interesting data on starch consumption leads to higher stearic acid production inside of you. There's some interesting things there, but the reality is that it does take time. You can't
Right.
expect
So
health.
just to make
Yeah,
this concrete for people, right? Not just your fat tissue or you're storing bubbles of fat in your fat cells, but like all of the membranes of your mitochondria and your cells, they're made of phospholipids and there's fatty acids in there. All of those things got to sort of recycle and turn over. So even if you start changing your fat intake today, you're eating a different fatty acid profile today than you were yesterday. It's going to take your body, like it's going to take time for all of the fatty acids in all of those cells to change their composition to reflect your diet. And I mean, just to echo what you experienced, the studies that have been done, decades ago, basically show that when you swapped PUFAs for saturated fats or vice versa, the body weight changes, for example, it took a couple of years for them to become significant. So,
yeah,
give or take ballpark, it's going to be a couple of years before
yeah,
all of the fats in your body and all of the lipid membranes in your body readjust to any change in fat intake that you're going to make in your life.
And there's data on livestock too. So it's based on our lifespan. With chickens, you can completely change the fatty acid composition in 3 to 4 weeks. And in pigs, it's 2 to 3 months.
Yeah.
In humans, it's like 2 years.
Yeah. What about, do you guys do dairy products as well?
Yeah. Gosh, Nick, this is a very unfortunate reality of the conventional dairy system. They are finding a way to PUFA dairy. So a lot of people think that due to biohydrogenation, if cows consume PUFAs in their diet, those PUFAs get converted into saturated fat. And so PUFA content is always low in dairy. For the majority, yes. But the mindset is so embedded that there are millions of dollars of research going into unsaturating dairy fat through things like oil seeds and what's called rumen bypass methods, where you throw so much PUFAs into a rumen that they can't process it and it gets passed through into the dairy. It's alarming. It hasn't reached mainstream as much yet.
But this is an active area of innovation. So they're trying to make these products work.
Our tax dollars are being spent on unsaturating dairy.
Wow.
Yeah. So oil seeds, rumen bypass methods, it's a little bit concerning, but I think it's not here yet. I'm sure that there are some conventional feedlots for conventional dairy that are doing this. I really strongly advise people to not consume like the omega-3 enriched dairy, because that's not the omega-3s that we want. That's plant-based ALA through algae oil or flaxseed consumption, where those cows are thrown so much of that it increases that inside their milk. It'll also increase the phytoestrogen. So knowing the source of your food is becoming like increasingly more important as things go on, because of that false belief that saturated fat is bad for us.
But
yes, we do dairy. We started with eggs, and then people wanted more things. So we are trying to build a little alternative food system with pretty much with everything. But I'm not saying that I'm like the only source of these good options. There are small regenerative farmers doing amazing things throughout the country. And if we aren't, the reality is that there's more and more farmers going out of business every year. Like the number of farms is declining.
Right.
And we do need to be able to find ways to better support these farmers to continue having access to traditional foods that have better fatty acid profiles.
Yeah. From a nutritional standpoint, in terms of the nutrition composition, what are the basic differences between pasteurized and raw milk?
I think the biggest thing is lactoferrin. Are you familiar with that compound?
I am, but I don't believe I've ever discussed it on the podcast. So let's tell people what that is.
You should definitely, there is a really cool research paper called like Lactoferrin, the miracle molecule, and it was from 2023 or 2024. You should try to have that researcher on your podcast. So lactoferrin in these various like online, or not online, in these various scientific circles, lactoferrin is seen as miracle compound. It is this heat sensitive protein that has anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, effects that improves gut health in so many different situations. It also is really good at iron regulation. And so it can bind to excess iron, which many of us are exposed to excess iron due to the massive government iron fortification that we've seen in our grains. Let's just throw iron shards into our flour. No big deal.
So lactoferrin is a milk protein. You find it in raw milk, but does it get destroyed in the pasteurization process?
Yep. And the more that a milk is pasteurized, the higher the temperature and the longer the duration, the more lactoferrin is destroyed. So I would say that that's probably one of the biggest benefits is raw milk and raw dairy products are going to have higher levels of lactoferrin. Then there are other like immunoglobulin compounds that are beneficial when it comes to someone who has reduced enzymatic production. So in very ideal high metabolic state individuals, we are able to produce enzymes inside of us. Some people have lowered metabolic rates and our enzyme production goes way down. Our enzyme activity is also temperature dependent.
Right,
and it's an inverse square law where you see a small drop in internal body temperature, which many of us have
Right,
because of
right.
downregulated metabolisms, our enzyme rate goes way down. Our
Right,
enzymes
right.
are functioning. So
So,
raw
so,
milk comes
so,
with those
yeah.
enzymes.
So even if like your body temperature, say, was zero point 0.5 degrees lower, it got zero point 0.5 degrees lower somehow, maybe because you're eating the wrong types of fats. That seems like a small difference, and in one sense it is, but actually because there's a non-linear relationship between how enzymes work and how quickly all the reactions happen and temperature, that could actually equate to a very big metabolic effect.
Exactly, exactly. And so a lot of people struggle with the production of enzymes. And so raw dairy is going to deliver some of those enzymes that some people aren't producing. And you see this, there's a lot of research showing that a lot of kids don't have allergies after consuming raw milk. And so we know that allergy is an immune system function, which relies on gut health. And so I think raw milk is providing these enzymes and gut supporting compounds that are destroyed by pasteurization. Now, I don't think that pasteurized dairy is bad. I think that there are people who can absolutely digest pasteurized dairy totally fine, but we can't ignore these millions of anecdotes of people never being able to digest dairy again, and all of a sudden they can consume raw dairy just fine. You hear about these miracle things that their gut completely healed after having raw dairy, and then you go back to the early 1900s, the milk cure, where doctors would use raw milk and have patients with like extreme chronic conditions, like really bad illnesses. They'd lay in bed for 2 weeks and just consume lightly warmed raw milk. So it's still raw, and all their ailments heal. Right. So there's these like miracle things, miracle compounds that I don't think many of us like completely understand yet
Yeah.
that I'm not saying it's a problem if you don't have to consume raw dairy. But I
Right,
think that there
right.
are plenty of cases that show that there are a lot of benefits. And then the reality of conventional dairy is like a lot of cow feedlots not produce well. And so, of course, you don't want to consume that milk raw. That's probably not the best option. And so, just the reality of being able to produce raw dairy that doesn't make people sick, it increases the quality of production. So it's just higher quality milk to begin with because that is required to be able to produce safe raw milk.
Okay. So the bottom line is pasteurization. It has its sort of sterilization effect. You can kill the
Yeah.
bugs in there that might allow the milk to last longer on the shelf, and that's great. But the process of doing that involves basically denaturing proteins that are in the milk, lactoferrin being one example. So there's stuff in raw milk that's no longer in or functional in pasteurized milk. And to the extent that stuff is good for some people or many people or whatever, that is being destroyed to a large extent in the pasteurization process. So they're not identical, just plus or minus bacteria. There's actually a different nutritional profile.
Exactly. There is a lot of the proteins can be denatured, and then the enzymes, the living enzymes, but the bacteria is actually really important because raw dairy is going to contain living bacteria. And there's really cool studies showing that raw cheese and raw dairy is one of the best probiotics to exist because those bacteria actually enter our gut. Right. Whereas a lot of probiotics on the supplement line, there's not much data showing that it actually survives our digestion and makes it to our gut. Okay, raw dairy has that, which can improve gut microbiome balance. And so that's why you probably see these people who are say, hey, my gut's like functioning so much better. Well, hey, yeah, if you solve dysbiosis by introducing beneficial bacteria, that can definitely play a role.
Yeah. So it's not just a matter of like unpasteurized milk, you set it on the counter for 2 days. Of course, it's going to like grow new bugs in there and go bad, but there could actually be beneficial bacteria already in there that are sort of just naturally from the cow and like that are already there. It's not like the milk has gone bad because it's been sitting around, but they're already there. And those could actually function as probiotics.
Yeah, the raw dairy is a very good probiotic source, especially raw cheese, because the amount of bacteria species like drastically increases with that aging process. Mm-hmm. And I mean, if you take a step back, it just makes sense. We have consumed raw cheese for so long. Like raw cheese is this food source that people could take in these long travel periods where they were going to discover new farming lands. We've been consuming raw cheese for over 7,000 years. And now all of a sudden saturated fat is bad. If you just take a step back, all that we're talking about with polyunsaturated fats, saturated fats, like it makes sense ancestrally, right? Like there's no historical precedence of high PUFA diets in any traditional food culture.
Right, right. That's an important thing. It's like if sort of one of the exercises I did for myself in the last few years that I've written about and talked about in different ways is like you kind of step back and you go like, okay, on the one hand, all of the traditional diets seem to not come with chronic illness, but wait a minute, there's all kinds of different traditional diets, and people were eating high meat diets and high dairy diets and no dairy diets, and people were eating almost carnivorous diets in some cases. Some people were eating sweet potatoes in Papua New Guinea or whatever. It's like, how could all of these ancestral diets not lead to chronic illness if there's no common denominator between them? And the answer is actually there is a common denominator. One of the big things is they are all low in polyunsaturated fatty acids, way, way, way lower than the modern human diet today. There are other things we could talk about, but that was the biggest thing that stuck out to me.
And we're being convinced that that was wrong, right? And it amazes me what big propaganda can convince us to do. And it all started with that single Crisco ad in 1911. And it's wild. It's wild.
Where can people go to learn more about what is the name of your farm? Tell people what it is, just so they know. And
Yeah.
like, how does it work on a practical level? Like, how can you order some? How does the whole thing work?
Well, I'll have to get your information. I'll send you a box of eggs to try. So I'll connect with you after this. But so our farm, we started Angel Acres Farm, and we started with 8 backyard chickens. And I just was like so obsessed with trying to improve the fatty acid profile of an egg. I was hand mixing our feed in our garage for so long. And then that expanded to having more chickens at our farm. The demand grew. So then we started partnering with other small farmers, and that Angel Acres Farm became a farm cooperative, and that's Nourish Food Club today. So Nourish Food Club started at Angel Acres Farm, but now we are a partnership of small regenerative farms working together to produce high quality food, not by pushing or scaling any farm individually, but by having more small farms in our network. And it is so fun for me. Like I love it so much. It's so fulfilling, and it scratches my like scientific nerd person because I can write about polyunsaturated fats, but then I also get to work with regenerative farmers. So I am so grateful for this opportunity. But we are nourishfoodclub.com is where people can find everything.
All right, great. Is there anything that you want to reiterate for people that we discussed today, or any final thoughts you want to leave people with?
I think the biggest thing is, while I do talk a lot on Twitter and I just started Substack and various things, I do share about our eggs and our food products. Like, yeah, of course, I'm going to talk about them and share about them because I'm proud of them. But I think that if you have a local farm that you trust and you can ask them various questions about what they feed their farmers and various things, like support them as much as possible, because that is how we actually make change, is by supporting the food that we truly believe in. And it's never going to be perfect. Like I'm not a perfect consumer. I buy various things at the store still. Like that's not the point. It's not about being perfect. It's about like one thing at a time, and finding in that one thing, making that one change in where you source something. I would start with something that you consume very regularly, right? Like eggs. Most people consume eggs every day. Or if it's cheese or milk, find one thing and find a better source for that where you're supporting small farm system directly. That makes a huge change. And I know that it seems so small, but when we compound those efforts across the country, I think that that's where we're going to see more bottom up change in how our food system is not only structured, but also the fatty acid composition of it. We as consumers can make those positive changes by being a little bit more conscious of where we're spending our money and understanding that these types of foods just cost more because there's no government subsidies. There's no like confinement, mass production, CAFO buildings, double decker things where costs are cut a lot. And so understanding that it is going to cost a little bit more for your health benefit and potentially avoiding healthcare costs down the line, and zooming out and kind of understanding the long-term bigger picture of things is difficult in this quick dopamine 7-second attention span world. But that's where we can really make change as a food system, restoring small regenerative farms. But that's also where we actually make positive health improvements, because we're not going to see quick fix changes within a week. It is going to take months, if not a few years, to actually see those day-to-day changes that you're making actually elicit results.
All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time, Ashley. I really appreciate it. And yeah, everyone go check out the link. I'll put it in the episode description and stuff like that.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me on. Appreciate it.
Hey everyone, a great way to support my efforts is to visit my support page at mindandmatter.substack.com. A link to that page is in the episode description, or you can search for it on the Substack page itself. The support page has an up-to-date list of my affiliate partners. These are companies I work with, and if you buy those products through those links or using the discount codes provided, those will get you a great deal on a variety of products related to optimizing physical, metabolic, or mental health and vitality. These are all products I use myself, and some of them are directly related to podcast episodes or formulated by Mind and Matter guests. For example, there's a great product called Keto Citra, formulated by a kidney biologist who is on episode number 186. It contains the ketone body BHB together with several minerals in a precise ratio formulated with kidney health in mind. There are also links to products like physical technology devices to track your metabolic health, digital applications to help you find and learn about food and consumer products, and more. One product I use every day is the AquaTrue water filter. I recommend this to everyone because it gets everything out of your drinking water. Heavy metals, microbes, endocrine disruptors, microplastics, you name it. Other charcoal or gravity-based filters that a lot of people use don't get everything out, they just get some of the stuff out. So I really like the AquaTrue product. You can look for a link to my affiliate partners on my support page or directly in the episode description to this episode, or you can go to mindandmatter.substack.com to find it there.